Alex stared at the glowing screen of his cell phone, his grip unsteady as his thumb hovered over the send button. The message he had composed was short, yet it carried the crushing weight of months filled with heartbreak and disillusionment. "I'm divorcing you." The simplicity of the words belied the complexity of the emotions they encapsulated. He had spent countless sleepless nights grappling with doubts, replaying the betrayals, and yearning for answers that would never come. Meanwhile, she was out there, immersed in the party, seemingly carefree, wrapped up in the arms of another man. The irony of it all, her laughter, her joy, was a stark contrast to the silence and solitude he now faced. Every detail of her nights out, every shared glance and caress, had been meticulously recorded by him over the past few months. It wasn't mere suspicion, but an intricate narrative of betrayal he had been piecing together in the shadows. Why had the woman he once envisioned a future with, who had promised to be his forever, chosen to embrace another? He had tried to overlook the signs, the frequent absences, the feeble excuses, and the distant gazes during their fleeting moments together. But the empty spaces she left behind, at the dinner table, in the bed they once shared, in their conversations about the future, had grown too glaring to ignore. The betrayal had become a persistent shadow, darkening every silent moment between them. Initially, he had hoped it was a temporary phase, that she might return to him. But with time, it became clear that she had departed long before she walked out the door that night. Now, standing on the precipice of finality, he contemplated her reaction as he prepared to send the message. He wanted her to feel every ounce of the pain he had endured. This was not just a text. It was the beginning of a new chapter where she would be held accountable for each lie, each fake smile, and every touch meant for someone else. He drew a deep breath and pressed send. As the message departed, it felt as though time itself had stopped. He immediately saw the notification that the message had been read. His heart raced with anticipation. Would she break down in tears? Would she attempt to call him? Or perhaps, would she remain in the embrace of her lover, indifferent to his farewell? The phone vibrated again. He imagined her in a darkened corner of the party, paralyzed by the message, struggling to contain her emotions while her lover remained oblivious, or worse, took pleasure in her distress. Was this how her final memory of their wedding would play out? The party, her lover, and the message that shattered her world. He briefly questioned whether this was sufficient, if her suffering would match his. "I'm divorcing you," simple and direct. But he wanted her to grasp the full extent of what she had done. He envisioned her reading the message, feeling the weight of his betrayal with every word, and realizing the impact of her actions. The phone remained silent. No response came through. The emptiness was overwhelming, filling the void that had once consumed him with a new, unnerving sensation. Revenge mingled with a craving for an explanation, for a reason that might never be provided. The silence was heavier than any words she could have offered. It left him questioning what might come next. Would she return home to beg for forgiveness? Or would she disappear with her lover, leaving behind the life they had built together? He stared at his phone, feeling the weight of the silence. The void that had once been his alone now seemed to stretch into something deeper, an unexplored depth of betrayal he hadn't anticipated. The house, once vibrant and alive with shared dreams and laughter, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The minimalist decor and light walls that had once signified comfort now felt alien, hostile almost. Each corner of the home seemed to harbor memories that grew increasingly distant and painful. The emptiness was palpable. Alex and Laura had once been considered the perfect couple by many. They had met in college, both full of ambition and dreams for a bright future. Alex, always driven and focused, had pursued a successful career in finance, while Laura had channeled her creativity into a career as a graphic designer. Their life together had seemed idyllic. Frequent trips, dinners with friends, a beautiful home. Yet beneath the polished surface, cracks began to appear. In the early days, their conversations were frequent and rich, filled with shared dreams and intimate moments. But as Alex's career progressed, his long hours and growing responsibilities began to consume more of his time. Laura, meanwhile, sought solace in her art and design projects, attempting to fill the void left by Alex's increasing absence. The space between them grew, initially subtle but eventually significant. Words that once flowed easily were now replaced by silence. Alex's love for Laura was undeniable, but his work-driven focus led to a gradual emotional detachment. He believed that by securing a prosperous future for both of them, he was doing right by her. What he failed to see was that without Laura's presence, that future seemed hollow. Laura, on the other hand, grappled with a growing sense of isolation. She threw herself into her work, trying to reconnect with a love that once seemed unbreakable, but found herself increasingly alone. As the months passed, their attempts at reconnection became mere gestures. A candlelit dinner here, a surprise there, but Alex's exhaustion and preoccupation with work left these efforts unfulfilled. Laura's patience wore thin, and she began to drift further away, seeking solace outside their marriage. Alex noticed the change, but was too absorbed in his career to fully understand its significance. The cracks in their relationship deepened, unnoticed until they became chasms. That night, as Laura prepared for another outing, Alex reflected on their past. He thought of the woman he once fell in love with, the easy smile and dreamy eyes that had captured his heart. He wondered if there was still a chance to salvage something from their crumbling relationship. But as the silence enveloped their home, it became clear that the damage might be irreparable. The house, now filled with an almost tangible coldness, stood as a silent witness to their fading connection. Alex's world continued to unravel as days turned into weeks. The sense of disconnection that had been growing between him and Laura solidified into an undeniable chasm. They maintained their routines, Alex at work and Laura with her social engagements, but the vibrancy of their shared life had faded. What was once a partnership brimming with shared dreams and mutual understanding had transformed into a series of separate, solitary existences. Each followed their own path, both engaged in a struggle they no longer fought together. For Alex, the monotony of his days at the office provided little solace. He buried himself in spreadsheets and reports, the oppressive silence at home a constant reminder of what he had lost. Laura, on the other hand, seemed to be living an entirely different life. She was increasingly absent from their home, finding solace in outside activities and new acquaintances. Their conversations were reduced to perfunctory exchanges, each word and gesture a stark contrast to the warmth that once defined their relationship. Alex saw the signs of Laura's detachment, but chose to ignore them. Confronting the reality of their situation was too painful. His mind was clouded by denial, convincing himself that their love was resilient enough to withstand this phase. He hoped that with time, things would revert to the way they once were. Patience, he believed, would heal the wounds. Laura's detachment, however, was more than just emotional. She had started to explore a new relationship, one that began innocently but quickly evolved into something far more significant. It was at an art exhibition, an event Alex had canceled at the last minute due to work, that Laura first met David. The exhibition was a respite from her loneliness, a chance to escape the hollow routine she had come to resent. David was everything Alex wasn't at that moment: attentive, charming, and, most importantly, present. Their initial conversations were casual, focused on art and life, but the connection between them was palpable and undeniable. The attraction between Laura and David grew quickly. What started as flirtatious banter transformed into a deep emotional connection. Laura found herself drawn to David's warmth and attentiveness, aspects of herself that had been neglected in her marriage. She was aware of the boundaries she was crossing, but felt powerless to stop. The excitement of being seen, desired, and valued overshadowed her sense of guilt. As Laura's absences from home became more frequent, Alex remained oblivious to the true nature of her outings. He accepted her excuses, work meetings, social events, exhibitions, without question. Sometimes, he even welcomed her absence as a reprieve from the tension that had come to define their interactions. The growing void between them was painful, but easier to endure than confronting the truth he feared. One particular night stood out. Alex was buried in paperwork at the office, struggling to focus as Laura prepared for another evening out. She donned a red dress, a striking contrast to the muted colors of their recent days. She arranged her hair meticulously and scrutinized her reflection in the mirror. For a fleeting moment, she hesitated, a pang of doubt creeping in. But the desire to escape her reality overpowered any sense of remorse. She quickly brushed aside her guilt, stepping out to meet David. The gallery where David was waiting was alive with conversation and laughter. Laura felt a rush of euphoria as she entered, David's presence a comforting escape from her troubled home life. The evening was filled with shared moments of intimacy and connection. Laura knew she was pushing boundaries, but in that moment, the allure of freedom and desire was irresistible. Alex, meanwhile, was consumed by a growing unease. The silence at home was more deafening than usual. Laura's absence felt different tonight, more profound. He checked his watch repeatedly, the late hour heightening his anxiety. As his worry turned to anger, he resolved to confront the unsettling truth. He left the office, his mind racing with troubling scenarios, unsure of what he would find but certain that something was wrong. Upon arriving at the gallery, Alex's heart sank. Laura's car was parked outside. The sight of it sent a jolt of dread through him. He approached the gallery, his steps heavy with apprehension. Inside, the crowd seemed oblivious to the turmoil that was about to unfold. Alex's gaze searched frantically for Laura, and when he finally spotted her, his world tilted. Laura stood in the corner, engrossed in conversation with David. The closeness between them was unmistakable. David's hand rested on Laura's back, and she responded with a touch of her own, a gesture of intimacy that Alex had longed for, but had not received in months. The sight was a confirmation of his worst fears. Each moment felt like a betrayal, a crushing blow to the heart. Alex's approach was slow, deliberate. He felt as if he were moving through a fog, his anger and pain blending into a raw, overwhelming sensation. As he drew nearer, Laura's expression shifted from joy to shock. Her eyes widened, and the color drained from her face. The room seemed to freeze, the noise fading into a distant hum. The confrontation was inevitable, and the weight of unspoken truths hung heavily in the air. Alex finally spoke, his voice low and filled with the gravity of his emotions. "So, this is it," he said, the simplicity of the words contrasting with the depth of the pain he felt. It was not a question, but a statement of resignation. The betrayal was laid bare, and there were no words that could adequately address it. Laura's attempts to explain faltered. Her words were lost in the weight of the moment. David looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, a silent witness to the unraveling of a marriage. Alex's heart ached not only from what was visible, but from the silence that spoke volumes. Laura's lack of denial, her inability to offer an apology, and the cold acceptance of her exposed infidelity all added to the crushing blow. "I knew it," Alex muttered, more to himself than to Laura. He looked around the gallery, the festive atmosphere contrasting sharply with the personal devastation he felt. The realization that his marriage was irreparably broken hit him with a finality that was both painful and freeing. As he stood there, the enormity of the situation settled over him. The life he had once known was now irrevocably changed. People went about their lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding before them. Alex, however, felt crushed by the loneliness he had always avoided admitting. Infidelity wasn't just about Laura being with another man. It was confirmation that he had been left behind long before he even realized it. Laura approached, hesitantly, as if searching for a way to fix what was broken, but Alex's eyes stopped her. He didn't want to hear excuses. There wasn't enough excuse in the world to erase what he had just witnessed. "I can explain," Laura tried once again, her voice trembling with regret and fear. But Alex was already too far away to hear. He took another step back, distancing himself not just physically, but emotionally. He finally understood what he had been trying to ignore for so long. Their marriage was over. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, the shattering of all the promises and dreams they once shared. He knew that any explanation now would be a futile attempt to mend the irreparable. He didn't want to listen anymore. The man next to Laura remained silent, as if he understood that his presence there no longer mattered. What mattered was the devastation between Alex and Laura. Alex felt the weight of everything that lay ahead. The memories of happier times, the life they had built together, now seemed distant, as if they belonged to someone else. He turned around slowly, ready to leave. There was no more to say, no more to do. As he walked towards the door, he felt his cell phone vibrate in his pocket. It was a message. For a fleeting moment, he considered ignoring it, but something compelled him to check the screen. It was from Laura, and those few words would change everything. "I'm pregnant." Alex stood still, staring at the message on his phone screen. The words seemed to dance before his eyes, impossible to comprehend at that moment. Pregnant. Laura was pregnant. He looked at her, still standing next to David, her eyes fixed on her own hands, as if she were afraid to meet his gaze. The weight of those words was crushing. All of it was suddenly replaced by a new reality he wasn't ready to face. Pregnant. That was what changed everything. He approached again, his steps now heavy with uncertainty. Laura looked up, realizing he had read the message. The silence between them grew even thicker, filled with a new tension, something Alex didn't know how to handle. As Alex tried to speak, the words failed him. He felt a lump in his throat, a mix of shock and confusion. The anger that once drove him was now replaced by a deep fear of the unknown. "How did this happen?" he repeated, almost as if he were speaking to the void. Laura stepped forward, breathing deeply, trying to find the strength to speak. "I found out a little while ago. I didn't know how to tell you." Her voice was fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. She knew this revelation changed everything, but not in a way that could fix what was broken. Alex looked at the ground, processing the information. He didn't know what to feel. The idea of Laura being pregnant, of having a child with her, was something that would have once filled his heart with joy. But now, in the midst of betrayal, it felt like an emotional trap he couldn't escape. "Whose is it?" The question came out colder than he intended. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a visceral need to know if this child was his, or if Laura had betrayed him in every conceivable way. Laura hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. She knew that was the inevitable question. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice breaking under the weight of the truth she could barely accept. "I'm not sure." Alex felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. The question of paternity was a torture he had never anticipated facing. His gaze met Laura's, who was now on the verge of tears, and for a moment, he realized the burden this had on her too. But empathy was quickly replaced by anger. He couldn't believe he had been reduced to this, to a man who didn't know if the child his wife was expecting was his. David, the man next to Laura, took a step back, visibly uncomfortable. He knew his presence there was a reminder of betrayal, and perhaps also of doubt about paternity. Alex, however, couldn't even look at him. All he saw was Laura, his wife, the woman he thought he knew but now seemed like a stranger. Alex was silent for a long time after Laura's revelation. The room around him seemed to spin, but at the same time, he felt completely still, as if the weight of everything that had happened was trapping him. His mind struggled to process what this meant. It wasn't just Laura's betrayal. It was the doubt, the cruel uncertainty about the child she carried. And that doubt was tearing him apart in ways he never thought possible. He took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts, but the pain seemed ever-present. Laura's gaze was fixed on him, waiting for some reaction, some words to break the silence, but Alex didn't know where to start. Part of him wanted to just run away, leave everything behind. But there was another part, paralyzed, caught up in the possibility that the child might be his after all. He couldn't ignore this chance. "I didn't know how to tell you, Alex," Laura said in a broken voice, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't just sorry for the betrayal, but for the chaos that now engulfed them both. The future they had imagined together was shattered, and in its place were just a series of unanswered questions. Alex closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the world around him. He wanted time, space to think, to process what was happening. But Laura's words, the pain in her voice, the weight of betrayal, all hit him like a physical blow. There was a storm inside him, of anger, confusion, but also of a love that, no matter how hurt he was, still existed in some way. "You weren't sure?" Alex finally asked, his voice low but filled with disbelief. It was a simple question, but it carried immense emotional complexity. He wasn't just asking about paternity. He was questioning the entire basis of their relationship, questioning how they had gotten to this point. "I wanted to believe it was yours, but I can't be sure. Not after everything." The confession, though honest, hurt him even more. Alex felt betrayed not just by her actions, but by the lack of clarity, the doubt now hanging over everything. Physical betrayal was one thing. He might have been able to get over it with time, but the uncertainty about her child, about what she really felt, was something he didn't know if he could ever forgive. "And what did you expect?" Alex asked, his voice now filled with bitterness. "That I would just accept it? That I would look at you and pretend everything is okay?" Laura bit her lower lip, unable to respond immediately. She knew that nothing she said would change what she had done, and the only thing she could offer now was her sincerity, even if it caused more pain. "I didn't know what to do," she admitted, her voice fragile. "I was confused, alone. I made a mistake, but I love you, Alex. I always have." Silence settled in again. Alex stared at her, but he no longer knew who she was. The woman he loved was there, in front of him, but at the same time, she seemed like a complete stranger. And the love she claimed to have sounded empty in the face of everything they had lost. Alex laughed bitterly, taking a step back. "Is this love to you, Laura? Lying, hiding, leaving me believing that we still had a chance." Laura was crying now, her shoulders shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. I just didn't know how to stop." Alex felt the anger rising again, but it wasn't the explosive rage he had felt upon seeing Laura with another man. It was a deeper, more contained anger, one that came from the profound sense of emotional betrayal that consumed him. He looked at her, at the woman he had chosen to spend the rest of his life with, and realized that something inside him had changed. Maybe forever. "It's not just about what you did," Alex finally said, his voice cold but firm. "It's about what you destroyed. You destroyed the trust, the respect." In the aftermath of their confrontation, the weight of the situation hung heavily in the air, each second stretching into eternity. Alex, now burdened with the crushing realization of the betrayal and uncertainty surrounding the baby, knew he needed to escape the confines of the space that had once been their sanctuary. The finality of his decision echoed in his mind, and he understood that his path forward required clarity and distance from the emotional wreckage left behind. Laura stood motionless, her eyes reflecting the devastation she felt. The silence in the house was deafening, each corner now a reminder of the dreams they once shared. Alex's departure left her alone with her remorse and fear. The realization that her actions had led to this irreparable fracture weighed heavily on her. The silence around her was not just the absence of Alex, but the profound emptiness of a life now shattered. As days turned into weeks, Alex wandered aimlessly, seeking solace in the anonymity of the city. His heart, though bruised, was still tethered to a hope of renewal. Each day was a struggle between confronting the past and envisioning a future free from the shadows of betrayal. The constant battle between anger and lingering affection was exhausting. The decision to separate, though clear in his mind, was not without its emotional toll. He grappled with the painful knowledge that he was severing ties with someone he once loved deeply. Laura, left to navigate the consequences of her choices, faced a future filled with uncertainty. The absence of Alex was a stark reminder of the trust she had broken. Each day brought new challenges as she prepared to raise a child whose paternity was in question. The guilt of her actions, combined with the daunting reality of single parenthood, was a burden she would carry for a lifetime. The support of her family provided some comfort, but it could not erase the weight of her decisions. Alex eventually returned to the home they once shared, But the atmosphere was now charged with a tension that made the air feel heavy. Laura, sensing the gravity of the moment, braced herself for the finality of Alex's decision. His demeanor was resolute, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and determination. The conversation that followed was a painful affirmation of the inevitable end. Alex's voice, steady but filled with sorrow, conveyed the depth of his resolve. "I can't continue like this," Alex began, his words slicing through the silence with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "I've thought about everything, the betrayal, the broken promises, but living with this doubt about the baby, it's something I can't bear." Laura's attempt to respond was met with Alex's firm refusal. The explanations and justifications seemed futile in the face of the emotional chasm that had opened between them. The decision to file for divorce was not made lightly. Alex's voice, though calm, carried the weight of finality. "I can't be part of this anymore. I need to move on, find some semblance of peace." The finality of his words was a harsh reality for Laura, who was left to confront the consequences of her actions. Tears streamed down her face, but Alex's resolve was unwavering. He needed to close this chapter and find a way to rebuild his life. The divorce proceedings were swift, reflecting the lack of conflict between them, but also the profound sadness of their situation. Alex relocated to a new city, seeking to rebuild his life far from the painful memories. The process was challenging, but with each passing day, he found a measure of solace in the distance and the promise of a fresh start. Laura's journey was equally arduous. She continued with her pregnancy, facing the reality that the child she carried was not Alex's. The discovery that the baby was fathered by someone else only served to reinforce the separation of their paths. Laura raised the child with the support of her family, but the regret of her actions and the destruction of her marriage were constant companions. David, the lover who had been a part of this tumultuous story, vanished from Laura's life once the news of the pregnancy emerged. His departure was a stark reminder of the fleeting nature of infidelity and the promises made in the heat of the moment. Laura's life, now marked by the absence of both Alex and David, was a reflection of the emotional turmoil she had endured. In the end, Alex, Laura, and the child who would never be his continued on their separate journeys, each facing the repercussions of their choices. The scars of betrayal and doubt remained, but Alex found a measure of peace in accepting the impossibility of controlling every aspect of life. Life moved on, as it always does, leaving behind the remnants of a marriage that had been irreparably broken.